Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War, live chat, update, military aid, geopolitics, and of course we will definitely have to talk about Trump's assassination attempt. That is the assassination attempt of Trump, not him doing it. Language. It is a crazy day geopolitically, politically concerning the US. My goodness. But we will come to that. Let us start where we normally start. I don't have anyone to bounce my ideas off live. It was a bit of a last minute thing, had family round, decided I've got all this content I need to purge from my mind and my lists. And so live is the easiest way to do that. But a bit short notice really to get anyone else involved. I sent Prof. Gerdis a link to see if he can join in because it would be great to have him on board. I haven't sent someone like Matt Bishop in Australia a link because I presume he's asleep. If he's not, Matt, if you are watching this, you're welcome to come on and have a chat. Okay, so let's go and discuss our normal sort of content first. We're going to start with military aid. And it seems weird to be discussing something like this when we've got this assassination attempt that's just taken place. And that seems to be not just strangling the bandwidth of the information spaces, but in my own mind, it's like all I can think about. But anyway, we'll start with the news that Ukraine and Sweden are still talking about the transfer of Jazz 39 Gripen fighter jets, according to Deputy Head of the Presidential Office, Ihor Zhovka. He said that this topic is consistently raised in discussions with Swedish leadership and added that Ukraine never refused these fighter jets, contrary to media reports. And if you remember, I mean, I've talked about this a number of times, it was apparently the case that those who are providing F-16s actually called for the Gripen to stop being considered because it was kind of getting in the way of the logistics and the conversations concerning F-16. So it wasn't a case that the Ukrainians pulled the stop or indeed the Swedish pulled the stop. And so therefore, both sides, the Ukrainians and the Swedish here, appear to be well up for this to continue. Obviously, Gripen provision is to the benefit of Sweden economically and in terms of military influence and whatnot. It's a great marketing opportunity for Saab and for the Swedes to highlight the usefulness of the Gripen, designed to fight against Russian aircraft, the very aircraft that they will fight against, with a good weapon set, the Meteor missile, super useful. And it's got, short takeoff, can take off from a road, has a very small maintenance footprint, small number of crew, and cheaper to fly per flight hour, considerably cheaper to fly than the F-16, interestingly. It doesn't have these air intakes that will suck up the FOD, the foreign object debris, on the runway, so it can be used on less than optimal runways. Gripen is a great option, and yeah, it should be on the table, and really Ukrainians should be being trained on the Gripen already, is my personal opinion. But F-16s are the focus. We're going to talk a fair bit about sort of different types of drones and whatnot at the moment. Ukrainian jet drone, the Bullet, has been tested, designed to intercept drones, helicopters, etc. So it's reported that the drone gained speed up to 130 kilometers. The price of the complex of 5 drones and a ground station is almost $145,000. So it's not like crazy cheap. It's not the first attempt of Ukraine to create a jet drone, but so far there's been no mass use of them. Interesting that it's designed to intercept drones and helicopters. Something like this would be, I guess, ideal in terms of being able to catch a helicopter and just, I presume, fly straight into it. But yeah, so that is a jet drone that can, I guess, get a fair bit of pace behind it. But anyway, that's that. We'll see if that amounts to anything. Against drones, that would be against attack drones, something like something like the Orlan drone, a reconnaissance one, Shaheeds, and so on. I presume you just try and slam this thing into those other ones. A Ukrainian anti-drone net system has been extensively tested and is ready for deployment, says this source. The Ukrainian system has an aluminium spider with just 4 legs for a 4-sided net, in contrast to the 12-legged Russian round net system that has successfully entangled Mavic. So the Russians are already using these sorts of things. This is a Ukrainian version. So they're waiting for feedback on them, but it looks like it's been tested 105 times. There's a little nervousness around it. Obviously, you know, when you're trying to make a success of something you've designed. This is it in use. Oh, I keep forgetting that the way I do it now, you're not hearing all of this. And the same with the jet drone I just shown you. But anyway, you can't listen to the delightful music here. As yeah, a number of these nets are thrown out. It's been tested. Seems like it should do a pretty good job. I mean, it's not the most complex of things. Drop a net on a drone from above. We've seen the Russians do this to the Ukrainians. Russians are complaining about the Ukrainian Yak-52. So the Yak-52 is that, remember that old school airplane that is a prop airplane that has been flying around Odessa with someone in the back shooting at drones and successfully apparently taking out some of these drones. So Russians are complaining about the Ukrainian Yak-52 flying over Odessa and with a high efficiency shot down our reconnaissance drones for a week, causing laughter in some circles. This has not been funny to drone operators and for us for a long time. Isn't it time to shoot him down? So interesting that the Russians themselves are complaining about the success of this. Well, great. Let's get more of them up in the air. Sounds like a good option. Germany is developing a plan to transfer troops in the event of a Russian attack on the EU, according to Der Spiegel. Boris Pistorius warned that the country must be fully ready for defense by 2029 and noted that Kremlin's military economy is already preparing for the next major conflict. Now, there has been talk about NATO readying for such an attack, as you would imagine they should do, because quite frankly, that's kind of what NATO is preparing for. That's the whole raison d'etre for NATO, is to deter Russia so that they don't attack anywhere in the NATO sphere. But also, if Russia do attack, then Article 5 is triggered. But then what happens? You can't just like say, oh, Article 5 would be triggered, and then everyone just haphazardly throws in their army, air force, navy, and whatnot, and no one quite knows what the other person is doing or the other nation is doing. So you need a coordinated effort. So NATO would have war gamed this, but also individual nations need to have a really clear idea. So in the last this NATO summit that's just taken place, I think they were talking about having civil plans up in place for in the event of a Russian attack, or indeed any attack on NATO nations. So yeah, this is not surprising at all, but we're hearing about it more formally here. Oh, Prof. Curtis is here. Darren, how are you, my friend?
I'm good.
You are here. We are live at the moment. I was just finishing my my military aid segment, and then I was going to go on to the geopolitics. And I thought, since you're here, we could, I guess, talk about the whole Trump assassination thing first. Maybe that'd be the best use of your time.
Yeah.
Just the last thing I was going to say about military aid is that videos coming out of the Russian forces utilizing and loading up FAB 3000 UMPC. So these are on Su-34s. I don't know how, only a single bomb is loaded because these are so heavy. But 3,000 kilogram bombs being loaded onto Russian planes and supposedly being utilized already is pretty devastating. And that's going to be a hard pill for the Ukrainians to swallow, because the Russians are still able to use these planes with impunity. The Ukrainians aren't allowed to strike the airfields into Russia. That's really frustrating, and they are using bigger and bigger bombs to wreak havoc. Right, so that's the military aid segment. I was going to go. I've got a few things to go through with regard to the situation in the US at the moment with the attack, or with the assassination attempt on Trump. I guess for you, Darren, what are your initial thoughts about the whole thing?
it's bizarrely surreal. Like I remember Reagan in the 80s, right? But this is not, there's not been anything like this in the 40 years since, right? So and people are like, they have to step back and go, let's think about what it means to be human here. He was just within an inch of his life, literally,
Mm,
right? If
mm,
he hadn't turned his head to look at something and talk about whatever he was talking about, turned his head, that probably would have been end of the game for him. There was
mm,
somebody else, like, okay, the person that did it is dead. There was somebody behind him that got killed.
mm.
I can't remember. I just saw it
Is
on.
a is apparently a fire chief, a retired fire chief, or
Yeah,
something
father
like
of
that? Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, and somebody others are injured, and yet people are talking about it like, well, this was a conspiracy, or this was that, or he did it to himself, or whatever it is. Suspend that. There might be a time to think about, like, first of all the rhetoric should have come down anyway. All the uh vitriolic rhetoric all around, the temperature should come down anyway, regardless of this. But like, let's not worry about that part until we like get back in touch with our own humanity first
Mm.
before we start talking about, well, what does this mean for the election? Please, like, this is bad. Like regardless of what you think of Trump, that was an attack on democracy, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah. No, I agree partially, but I am myself victim, or not victim. I am myself guilty of what you're saying, which is my first go-to is that Trump is okay. So, and interesting. I'm not trying to work out whether, I mean, it doesn't really matter because the bullet was aiming for him, right? So, but there are some saying that actually it was a teleprompter glass that smashed and that cut his ear. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. That's irrelevant, actually. But he is ostensibly okay. It's maybe not psychologically. He's going to be super shocked by that. But yet someone has died. But I'm still like, I go straight to, my goodness, okay, what are the ramifications? Not for just the campaigns, but for like the whole political landscape in the US.
And I understand. And if you talk about that behind closed doors, as I did with my wife last night, and I said, whoa, this is a game-changing event, that's fine. But to then go out on Twitter and say this and that and the other, like, just like, let's get in touch with our humanity again first. Let's take a deep breath, step back, think about who we really are, because we agree on far more than we disagree on. And like, I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of Trump, right? I don't think he's good or healthy for the Republican Party. Now's not a time to double down on something like that and, add insults or that sort of thing. This is a significantly bad experience for the democracy. And it's not a time to make your partisan political point, whatever it is. But it's terrible. And the Secret Service right now has got to be flipping out, going like, whoa, how did we miss this? How did we...
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, that's probably a good place for me to jump in terms of what the Secret Service might have done or not done so we can, okay, let's not talk about political rhetoric. Although I would say this, Darren, that if you say, right, I'm going to step back and not cast my opinion here because I'm going to give time for the dust to settle and to have a proper humane reaction to this, then that actually leaves a vacuum for people.
Let's talk about it tomorrow. But right now, it's not even 24 hours since an attempted assassination on a former U.S. president who may very well be a future U.S. president. Like, this is enormous. But let's think about the political after we think about being human first, right? And so that's the first place. And then we can talk about that. But let's like people are way too quick. And maybe it's just because of social media. Maybe social media has done something wrong to our brains where we have to have it right now. No, there's mature reflection that needs to happen here before we get really, really into the, what does this mean? I have opinions, but I think we ought to talk about that secondarily. And right now, just, this is bad for democracy. This is unhealthy. You don't want to go down this kind of path, generally speaking, in a democratic republic. So
Yeah, Richard Bennett talks about Alex Garland's film, recent film. Oh no! If anyone has seen a civil war, they will know they will not want one. But I was just going to make reference to the Alex Garland film Civil War that came out recently, and I got sort of thoughts about that this morning. Would it be all right then?
So let me ask you that.
Sorry,
Did that movie add fuel to this kind of fire?
No, I mean for me it was like quite cerebral, and actually it was more. No, I don't think it did actually. Really, that's a perfectly fine movie to certainly to have brought out when it came out. I mean, it takes years to make these things, so it would have been thought through. You know, it's not.
No. I mean, add fuel to the angry rhetoric that we're just tuning in.
No, I don't think that film did, but okay. I think there's plenty that does. I mean, like my point was going to be that, you know, when you hear people like, you know, JD Vance and others, and people on both sides, actually, some people saying all sorts, that I think that is really opportunistically capitalizing. So my then reaction is, well, I need to provide the counter narrative to that, because I think that is so damaging. But rather than to step back and say we need to let the dust settle, because I think that then gives that vacuum gives the ability for these people to present things that are unchallenged. Would be my position.
Yeah, I think that there's plenty of ugly rhetoric, and whichever side you're on, you'll see it on the other side more clearly than you'll see it on your own. And so that's why we need to listen to each other, right? Because I'm much more likely to be aware of the conservative or Republican perspective than maybe you are, and vice versa. And that's fair, but that's why we need to listen to each other.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I was going to go to, and maybe I'll just keep all of my subject matter till tomorrow, till the dust has settled a little more. But someone was talking about, let's be human. Trump and his rhetoric caused us to go in a downward spiral. Paul Pelosi. I was going to talk about Paul Pelosi because the reaction to Nancy Pelosi having an assassination attempt on her, when I hear JD Vance saying this is all, the rhetoric's all about like the left, and then I think, well, actually there was assassination attempt on Nancy Pelosi and her husband, and actually that was met with ridicule by Trump himself. But anyway, I
saw the clip of that yesterday. Somebody posted it yesterday. I said, have you no shame? This was like an hour after the event. I couldn't believe it. Right? Yeah. No, you can have that discussion later, but an hour after the event, are you crazy? Like, what is wrong with people?
So one thing that I am quite surprised about, and I know a number of my viewers adhere to this, is the idea that it is either staged or a false flag or something like that. And I
that's
have
another thing that I saw, and I'm like, 100%. You gotta get facts before you can just make assertions. Yeah. I mean, I'm preaching to the preacher here, no pun intended.
Yeah, but it's just because there's no way, or certainly no staging could happen, and to get like Trump saying, yeah, that's a great idea. You guys shoot at me with wind from 150 meters and shoot my ear, and then I'll fall down. And like, there's absolutely no way that he would be in on that. Like, if that goes wrong, like if the wind is slightly more, if he turns his head, then he's dead. And so no one's going to sign up to that.
I saw somebody post something about that with a reference to a WWE, World Wrestling Federation in the old days thing with Vince McMahon, where he was in the ring and okay, stop fabricating nonsense from your imagination and wait for real facts to come out. We'll find out. The first thing that people were posting, depending on which side you're on, right? So the first thing that people were posting was, he is a registered Republican. Well, he also gave money to Democrats. I don't know which he is. I don't know. I honestly do not know where he is. So find out, let the facts come out first before you try to make any sense of it. And in the meantime, you know, the better part of wisdom is biting your tongue and waiting and being mature.
Yeah, because there are lots of conflicting things. And my initial reaction to anything like this is whoever did it is probably a lone wingnut. And actually, as more information comes out, so he was very much a loner at school. He was bullied at school, supposedly, but he went into school in like hunter's costumes and so on. So it's all sort of coming out now. As they're like interviewing people who knew him, etc., etc. He was wearing a Demolitia t-shirt at the time, which is a gun channel on YouTube. He donated $15 to the Democrats when he was 17, but is now registered Republican. So you like all this information, and then more will come out, and then yeah. So I guess it's better to hold off on what his motivations were like right now,
right? Because you can read in either side easily
that's
now,
my point.
And then you just complicate the problem, make it worse, increase the kind of virulent rhetoric that's making the problem what it is. Like, we don't need to do that. But you and I have talked an awful lot about how, like, we can find common ground if we want to find common ground, right? I mean, that's what you have to want to do, though. And the country, and perhaps even much of the world, doesn't seem to want to do it.
There's also a strategic error you can make in jumping to conclusions. So, for example, for some of these people who are, well, both sides actually. So people on the right who are shouting, saying this is left, liberal, etc., all that kind of stuff, like assuming the shooter is a some kind of Democrat activist, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's that kind of thing. And then there's people on the left saying either it's staged or it's this or it's that, or he's a Republican or whatever. And then when the facts then do come out, like if they don't align with that, then you've come out and publicly whipped up this storm, especially if you're a politician with a big platform. So I think strategically, so for someone like JD Vance and other people to come out and say very much that this is a liberal left kind of thing, I'm thinking, whoa, if this is just a wingnut like gun fan who's like disturbed and doing it that's in a kind of apolitical way or whatever, I don't know, something that doesn't fit with that, then actually you're going to have egg on your face. So just sensible to just chill.
Yeah. I think that's right, because and the bigger the platform, the more it seems like it's your obligation to step back. And like Biden, I think, struck a really good tone yesterday. Right?
I'd agree.
Biden's comments where he came out. I don't know if you have that queued up.
Yes, I do. So and interestingly, and kudos to Trump. Trump has also come out and been
like that was the most tempered
thing he's ever been. But I was going to go on and come speak. So the initial statement, I haven't got the speech he made live, but the statement was like pretty, very kind of safe. And then he was. Then he came out and gave a kind of off-the-cuff speech. It wasn't particularly scripted, and he was
it was basically this. It was basically this, but said, impromptu, but the same script.
Yes,
and he called him Donald.
Yes,
and he said, I tried to call Donald, and right, like it was like you could see the humanness of that moment.
Yeah,
and we need more of that rather than whatever we've been doing. Right? I mean.
But yes, and I absolutely agree. But what's interesting about these moments, and it can be an assassination attempt, it can be, I don't know, somebody having a heart attack, or any kind of game-changing event like this. Straight away, you are going to have your strategist sitting down and say, right, how can we spin this as much to our advantage as possible? Or on the other side, how can we spin this so we get the least amount of cost to our side? And you're going to have naturally, like this is just obviously how it's going to be. The Republicans are going to be thinking, first of all, yay, this is actually going to work. Aside from the human elements, but you are going to have strategists sitting down and saying, right, how do we play this? What do we say? How do you work this? And so there will be probably advice to Trump, very sensible advice, saying you want to chill this out, because actually if you are seen as uniting rather than dividing, then that will play better with the electorate. Yeah, but all this advice, and Trump's come out and said the right things, and likewise for Biden, there will be advice going, right, how do we minimize this? You're going to have to be seen as uniting as well. So both of them are going to have to try and be like that, and they've both said the right things. I mean, maybe you don't want to discuss this now, but like I went straight to thinking from Biden's point of view, like, does this, because I was listening to analysis saying that he was likely to if he was going to resign, it could be like do it in the next couple of days. And of course, this will then, if he did do that, it will seem as it was a direct result of the assassination attempt, and so therefore they won't do that. But then, actually, in the long run, is he more likely to do this? And you got the Republican Congress, you're already strategizing kind of elements to like the decisions for both parties. So it's just going to be let's an absolute hot mess.
So let's do this. Let's talk about Biden and where he is. Not really talking about what happened yesterday, but just where he is. But
yeah,
let's also talk about how terrible this is for our democratic republic that this is happening. Like we don't want to go back to that kind of place. We were in this place back in the 60s. We weren't in this place with the Reagan assassination. That was just a wingnut. Like that wasn't politically motivated. But what we had in the 60s were politically motivated assassinations. You do not want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. This is, I mean, like you should call this what it is. Like even if you think that Trump is evil, like some of the worst things that I saw were people like, well, we should have killed Hitler before World War II. Like I understand if you have this opinion of Trump, but this isn't the time to be and like modulate some. Think through what it is. This is an attack on democracy in and of itself. Now, whether you want him to be beat or not is a secondary issue that you need to separate from what you shouldn't be doing to democracy here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What annoys me most about this, in terms of big picture blue sky thinking, is that you're now going to have a debate that doesn't concern itself with policy. You know, what happens is the election now becomes not political, it becomes tribal. And so what should happen is that one side should go, this is what we're going to do with healthcare. This is what we're going to do with education. This is what we're going to do with foreign policy. And the other side saying, well, that's rubbish for these reasons. And this is what we're going to do. Now it's just going to become, I worry it's going to become this tribal thing, where it's much more emotional and far less cerebral and policy driven. And that is to the detriment of the American people and the American future, because I don't think you're going to get to a sensible place arguing from that kind of, you know, base emotion.
I think in the United States, we've done that with COVID, immigration, and Ukraine. It became a tribal issue more than a policy issue, and it's very sad. It's very sad to see. So you're spot on. Okay, do you want to say anything else about the shamefulness of this in a constitutional democracy, or do we just go to right to Biden?
Well, for me, I mean, that's a given. It's just like, it's obvious it's a bad thing, and it's for every single angle I can work out, other than if you're going to be super strategic about Trump having a bounce. So if you're a Trump fan, then that's a positive angle, but anything else is a negative. There's nothing good about this in any way, is my interpretation. So yeah, it's bad every which way.
Okay, let's go back to 6 o'clock yesterday before this happened. It happened at like 6:15. You're Biden.
Right.
I was just on with the shills yesterday, and we were talking about this. I'm like, man, if you're Biden, like this is a bad place to be right now. Like I was showing in the predicted market how 2 weeks ago it was like Biden, Trump, neck and neck kind of thing. You know what the prediction market is? They spend their own money to essentially, it's like almost like sports betting, but it's done by academic economists. So somehow it takes the curse off it. They're just, you know, seeing what the real, what people want based on what they would actually put their own money on. And so you'd see 2 weeks ago, Biden and Trump neck and neck. And now you see Biden is way down and Kamala Harris came way up as far as like who will be the next Democratic nominee. And nobody was thinking Kamala 2 weeks ago. And now it's like 25, like, or at any rate, it's a real game like that. That debate really changed things. And calling Zelensky President Putin, I know he didn't think that was President Putin standing next to him. I know I slip sometimes and I say the wrong things. I get that, but it only feeds the narrative that's already there. And honestly, if you're a Democrat, and I'm not going to pick on the Democrats because I'm not one, so it just looks like an attack if I say it. Right. So I'm aware enough. Like it's like, you know, if I say something about my sister, that's fine. But Johnny, you say something about my sister. Now it's on. Right.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thing. So I'm not going to say it, but I think that they they admit now that they waited too long to address this, and now they're kind of in kind of a hole.
So, so much to talk about here with regard to this. Right. So again, 6 o'clock yesterday, nothing to do with the Trump assassination attempt. My personal opinion is that they should take on Kamala Harris, and I think it would be a risk, but I think it might work as a risk. Now, okay, there's several things, right? Biden seems to want to stay in it big time, and I think the reason he wants to stay in is because the people around him are telling him to stay in, including his family. Family want to stay in. Maybe that will support Hunter Biden with regard to court cases coming up. But also, I think a really important one is considering that everyone in the Biden administration will be employed by Biden, and if there's anyone else that's going to be a nominee, they've lost their jobs. And so, actually,
it's a powerful incentive structure, isn't it?
Yeah, you're literally going to be saying, I want you to stay in, Joe, and I'm going to give you all these reasons why I think you should stay in, but I want you to stay in because literally that is my job. Yeah. And so there's definitely an element of that I think is probably playing. But what was interesting about the polls that we've seen since the debate, which is they held, then it went down, and then they've gone back up to prior debate. And so the national polls are being interesting to the point where if they'd tanked, Biden would have had really good rationale to drop out. But this actually confuses matters for the Republicans because the representatives and the senators can't go to Biden and say, you're tanking in the polls, and that is that's going to be the biggest reason for you to drop out. Well, actually, he's got back to being neck and neck prior to the assassination attempt. So that makes it a bit confusing for Biden and for everyone really.
So who do you think wants him to drop out, Republicans or Democrats?
I actually think almost all Democrats apparently behind the scenes want him to drop out. As according to most analysts who have contacts and most journalists who have spoken to people and people like Pod Save America, who are former Obama administration speechwriters and people on the campaign who know everyone. And they're like, literally everyone we've spoken to, every Democrat who's a lawmaker that we have spoken to, and all these other Democrats has said, we want Biden to drop out, but we don't have the guts to say it. And not a single one of them had said they wanted Biden to stay. So I think behind the scenes, people want Biden to drop out. I think Republicans want Biden to stay in because I think
that's exactly right.
This is a known. Like, we know Biden now, and we think we've got him on the ropes, and he's showing himself to be weak. If someone like Kamala Harris comes in, then they have to change not just the way they think about it, but actually literally their adverts, their campaign, everything, like the money they spent on advertising. Suddenly they have to ditch all that and start again because you've got someone different, someone who's a bit of an unknown coming in, and also someone that the Biden administration themselves have sidelined to the point where her polls are probably artificially lower than they should be because actually not enough people know about her. Even though she ran for president, there's a lot of people in the American public that don't have a recognition of Kamala Harris. We're talking about not your politically astute people who spend their days, weeks and days like you and I do, like consumed with all this, but your average American who goes about their daily business, isn't really into politics, doesn't know much about Kamala Harris because actually she's not being frontlined by the Biden administration. And actually, if you put her into the limelight and give her the opportunity to go and prove herself, she could do a really damn good job. And I think the Republicans are thinking that could happen. We want Biden to stay in.
So how do you think Dems see Kamala? How do you think Republicans see Kamala? And how do you think independents do? That's really what it amounts to.
Great question, of course. So I think the Republicans would be otherwise dismissive of her, but now that it comes to that, or if it's Biden or Harris, they probably want Biden, as I say.
Yeah,
so
Republicans don't have a very favorable opinion of Kamala. Think she's kind of an empty suit. That's their perspective, generally speaking. Not everyone, but generally speaking. They prefer Biden to the point that they're talking about a lawsuit against the Dems if he drops out. That's how much they want. Like, seriously.
Yes. Yeah, I know.
The other day.
Yeah.
And because they see him as a bird with a broken wing. Like he's
Yeah.
going to have a hard time making it through. So they do want Biden to stay in because they think he can be beaten. I'm talking about like Republicans writ
Yeah.
large. I'm not talking
Yeah.
about me. I'm
I
just
agree.
saying they see that he can be beaten. If you're looking at like if you want Trump, that's what you want to do. Now, how do Dems see it, and how do independents see it? And
So with Dems, I think because she's not been given a chance, people are thinking about some of the times where she hasn't quite nailed it, but then there are times when she's really nailed it. So she nailed Biden in the presidential debate back in 2020 on the lead up to the 2020 elections. She had some really good times there, and that's partly why she was chosen as a vice president by Biden. But I don't think her and Biden necessarily have seen eye to eye, particularly, and that's why she's been sort of kept at a bit of a distance. But if you see what she's been doing over the last month, she has been, by all accounts, absolutely on point and very, very strong, particularly in the domain of, and you might not recognize this, but in the domain of reproductive rights, she has been on the campaign trail.
she's doing a good job speaking to her core base on that. I can't help but filter my world through the way that I see it. And when you're saying she's on point, I'm thinking like, are we talking about the same person? But again, I'm a Republican. I see it through a very different.
So the question was, how do Dems see her, right? And,
right.
And the question is, Dems are motivated. In fact, they've got the strongest chance of winning on things like reproductive rights, on things like the rule of law and Trump's both immunity claims, but
the
actually
felony versus the prosecutor
felony
line.
So
that is felony, actually. Yes.
Yeah, felony. So she's a prosecutor. She's a former lawyer, attorney general. Was she in California? So she's got the skills. And when you put her on a prosecutorial footing, right, not necessarily standing up and making a speech per se, but actually tete-a-tete with someone like Trump in a debate, she could haul him over the hot coals potentially. Now, whether she would,
but Dems may believe that. What about the middle?
So here's the thing. So the middle is going to be largely about, and by middle, I also mean people who aren't particularly politically motivated, but might sit naturally would say the Democrats, because there might be a lot of black and brown voters who might be mobilized, who otherwise might not have been bothered, might not have been too bothered with Biden, with all the TikTok videos of Biden's mental acuity going down the pan and so on and so forth, that might go, now I've got some representation. I know she's not always massively popular, even with, across black and brown communities, but then I think a lot of that is to do with, it's a mere exposure effect. So the mere exposure effect is a psychological effect, which is the more you see someone, the more credible they become. So if you don't see enough Kamala Harris and say, what's your view of her, then it's going to be fairly crap. If you see more and more of her and she's speaking strongly on matters that mean a lot to you, so for Democrats, she'll speak on those matters, but also for the independents, they find Trump being a felon a serious thing. And
that's correct. The polling does show that it breaks against Trump, where Republicans, there's a good portion that are like, hey, this is rigged. Nobody else, if his name wasn't Trump, nobody else would have been charged with that. Why isn't Hillary charged? Right. So, yeah. So
I think, and reproductive rights is also important for independents too. And so my opinion, and I've come around to this now, because not only is $91 million wrapped up in the Barris Hayden account, that if you had anyone other than Kamala Harris, you couldn't access at 91 million, then I think Kamala Harris is probably your natural action.
Unless she released it, which she could release. I mean,
and then it will have to be re-given by those same people. Right.
She could release it and work that. The Democrat machine could make that work, right?
It's just much more complicated, I think.
Yes, certainly.
So I think, if I was a Democrat, because I think her with someone like Gavin Newsom. So if you think about all these other people who are could be the person instead, whether it be Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer or whoever you think it might be, Josh Shapiro, then those people would actually be really good VPs as vice presidents as well. And actually, so you get the best of both worlds. So the more I think about it, the more sensible the Kamala Harris option actually might be, and I think it is better than Biden.
Yeah, I see it a little bit differently in this regard. I think that if the Democrats could put away the hard line, they could have the if they could find a candidate who would put away the hard line and appeal to the middle, they could have the left kind of going, he's not Trump, but I'll take him, and a wide swath in the middle, including a bunch of Republicans who don't want Trump. If they could put up a somewhat moderate, just what happened in Britain, what just happened with Keir Starmer. If the left could pick up a candidate like a what's his name from West Virginia, can't remember, senator from West Virginia who's just
Joe Manchin.
Manchin. If they could just pick up someone that's moderate enough that it's appealing to the middle first, they're going to get the left because Trump's too terrible for them. Like what Hillary was to us in 2016, right?
But I'm not sure. It depends whether you see Kamala Harris as that far to the left, because personally I wouldn't, because she's quite moderate. From UK European point of view, she's just fairly normal moderate. But then that's a difference in UK European politics compared to the US. But yeah, I again, the point is, it doesn't matter what the Democrats think about Kamala Harris, really, because they're going to vote for anyway. So it is just the independents, and this is why apparently the Biden administration has been putting out, like Biden himself has been putting out polling recently on Kamala Harris to see how she polls, and actually and Ipsos as well has done polling that suggests she's polling better than Biden. So I think there are growing arguments to suggest she would be a good option. Now, no, she's not for everyone. I know there are people in the threads that are probably going to be like, no, what are you talking, Kamala Harris? But you've got very limited options with such a small amount of time to go, right. And she's already been publicly vetted. Right, so the skeletons in her closet are already out there, right? If you had to pick someone like Gavin Newsom, then the Republican information machine, like Fox News, would be going to town on trying to find information out about Gavin Newsom, and then skeletons would be thrown out from his closet, and that could lead into a lot of unknowns that are a bit dubious.
Yeah. So it's a dangerous game any way you cut it, but
yeah, I'd agree.
The prevailing sentiment on the Republican side is, now this isn't me, this is people who want Trump, right? I can't wait to run against Biden, especially since the debate, or calling him Mr. Putin or my vice president Trump. Like those kind of things feed into the narrative that just make
I agree.
Right.
I agree.
So
a cool thing to do would be a real risky thing to do is Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket and Adam Kinzinger. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, you know what? If you could find any kind of unity ticket, this is a time where honestly a third party might be able to prevail. This is one of the few times that I can remember that I would say a third party could actually swoop in right now and maybe make it. If you could find a moderate Republican and a moderate Democrat working together that were.
Honestly, I think like Adam Kinzinger, I like him anyway. Just we're not going to agree on all politics, but certainly on like Ukraine, he's nailing it. And actually, he's pretty sound on quite a lot of things to do with democracy and the institutions.
And being civil and just be civil.
Yeah,
like this is what I'm calling for. And I just, it grieves me when I see some of the comments in my threads that are just from either side. I'm not just talking about from the left. 2/3 of my audience are on the left side of the, which for some reason still listen to me, right? But I'm talking about from the right too. I don't want the MAGA kind of, vitriolic kind of stuff either. So,
yeah, in interesting times.
Where is Cheryl not? Every place that I go, I see Cheryl Waitley. Wherever I show up, there she is in the threads.
She's just an AI bot, able to be everywhere. No, you're not. Oh, that's a joke. Of course you're not. Wonderful human. But yes, so that's just. I mean, this is where I know, like you say, it's terrible to have some humanity. But like I'm always just like strategizing in my head about everything, and
my first thought was political, and then I said, "Darren, stop! Think about the human cost here."
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and then, but yes, absolutely. It is certainly going to be potentially quite a febrile time, hopefully not a violent time in the US, because there have been some people that said for a long time that the US is actually inching towards civil war. Like some people have been saying that I can foresee this happening. I've always been like, no, don't be silly. And then something like this could spark off like not civil war, but certainly acts of greater violence than
Sure.
perhaps we've seen, and that's never a good thing.
And look, I mean, overblown rhetoric is already there from the politicians, and then it's fed by social media, and there are people that have a vested interest in making the overblown magnified, right? It's like the opposite of what I try to do.
Yeah. I mean, I was going. Yeah, no, I'm not going to talk about. Well, yeah, I just get worried that like some of these people who are presenting this as being like the evils of the left are really capitalizing on this and forgetting things like hang Mike Pence and gallows being erected at January the 6th,
Mhm.
and even indeed Trump being not only ridiculing about Paul Pelosi but also about Mike Pence and leaving him out to dry, and that just being like, you've got to remember, like, okay, if you're going to attack the left for X, Y, and Z, you've got to own some of the rhetoric and some of the stuff that's been said on the right. Like there are, this is just a not a good time, and social media doesn't help, and amplification doesn't help, and Russian bots don't help. They're already
No.
onto this. Like already, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has come out and
Yeah,
said,
Zakharova.
yeah, like being pro-Trump and saying, just whipping it up. Like if you are a Republican that wants to get angry about this, right, you're going to have the wind behind your sails coming from Russia, that's for sure. And it's really worrying. They're writing stuff on bombs and all sorts, for Trump and all this, and it's worrying that this plays into that geopolitical domain as well.
So how do we get out of this? So as far as I can tell, the only solution that I can see is that the adults in the room on both sides are talking to their own crowd and saying, let's not do this. Let's not continue to whip this up. Let's calm down the rhetoric. But that's like me talking to my Republicans. Does that make sense? And not talking at the other side saying, you know what, you do it too. I don't
So
think that you do it too is gonna bring us where we need to go. I think we need to we need to calm it down. We need to calm it down.
so the question depends on what the motivation of the shooter was, right? So if the motivation of
Yeah,
the
that's
shooter
true.
was political, like overtly political, and I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense. But then the other thing is, like, why would anyone want to kill Trump unless they really didn't like Trump? Like there must have to be some kind
But
of
you could just
political
be a
element to
lone
it.
nut that doesn't have political
Yeah,
motivations and still not really like them.
yeah.
Like, so it could be for all kinds of we just don't know what it is, but we do need to calm things down.
But
And
but
the way that
but
we've
why?
been going has not been sound.
But why that's important is because if it is overtly political from the shooter, then it's incumbent upon Biden to calm down rhetoric on the Democratic side. But I also think, irrespective of what's happened, of why the shooters decided to do that, it is actually, and this sounds harsh because Trump is a victim, but actually it's incumbent on Trump to do the most here to calm things down, because actually most of the reactiveness will be coming from the right naturally, because they're
Yeah, right.
he's the victim there and represents them. And so actually the calls for revenge and retribution will be absolutely
Sure.
there to deal with. And actually it is therefore on Trump to be the calmer and to be the unifier. Now he's done that already, but he's not got great form for that.
Yeah, I'm not terribly optimistic about that because MAGA is as much a disposition as it is an ideology. It's actually perhaps more of a disposition than an ideology. I'll explain what I
Yeah,
mean.
I know, I'd
Um,
agree with you, but yeah, go for
my
it.
my wife is from the Pennsylvania, Maryland border counties, like kind of out in the country where cows outnumber people. That kind of whatever. I grew up 20 minutes outside New York City. And so when she tries to replicate a New York kind of accent, it always sounds like some kind of like Russian comedian trying to speak, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are you going to do? It's like that did not sound anything like, like, because it's just the accent in New York, like, hey, what are you going to do? Right. it's attitude as much as it is, you know, uh, the way that you inflect. The inflection is kind of based on attitude, or because the way you kind of interact with the world. That's how MAGA operates, in my estimation. It's more attitude about we're going to fight them, whatever, right? Fight, fight, fight. It's more of that than it is specific policy considerations that brought me to where I am within my party. Does that make sense?
Absolutely right, because you know that no matter what Trump says, they will get behind it. And so he says really unconservative American stuff like protectionism. We're going to put tariffs, 100% tariffs on everything coming in, and therefore it's because he wants that, then that's what we're going to go for,
That's
rather
right.
than thinking that's ideologically really weird. I'm not too cool with that. So yeah, I do completely agree that Trump could almost say virtually anything apart from maybe welcoming immigrants in, like 100%, like that would maybe, but most other things, in particularly in the economic sphere, like he's a populist, and actually if he said some fairly left-wing things like, oh,
Yeah.
we need to get clean water by nationalizing some of the water things and blah blah blah, he'd probably get most of his support saying yeah. But if someone from the Democrats said that, they'd be like, screw that.
They're
Even though
terrible. They're right.
yeah,
I wonder to what degree conservative support lacks for Ukraine because of the former, what you just said, or because of the latter. Well, the former because Trump said it, or because of the latter because, well, if Biden's for this, we're not for that.
but both, yeah, I mean, but both those
Like,
things are the same. So, but it
people
is
think.
not. It is not from a rational basis. So it is both. So it's become partisan, and so Ukraine support has become a Biden thing because that's where it's been pushed by both the kind of sort of the information space and the media, like Fox has kind of pushed that. But then have they pushed that because Trump himself has kind of
Well, Fox has been a mixed bag with that.
yeah.
Some commentators on Fox have been going that populist Trump route, and others have been a little bit more balanced. And I just turn
You're
off
right.
Laura
What's
Ingraham.
his name on Fox?
Watch.
Laura Ingram's, yeah. But one of the Fox and Friends guy, not Gary, not Juicy. Who's the other guy? Juicy?
Kilmeade?
No, Brian Kilmeade. I think
Yeah,
it is. It's
he's
actually
pretty good.
He's pretty good on Ukraine, and
Yeah.
sometimes holds people to account. I'm like, no, that's not cool. And I'm like, okay, so yeah, I would take that. But Trump, I think I'm certain that Trump is not good for Ukraine, and no matter what mental gerrymandering people do, I am absolutely positive, because you only have to see what he said physically, the words have come out of his mouth, what his children have said, or particularly some of his sons, and then what the people around him, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and people like JD Vance, and people like all of those thinkers around him, and Steve Bannon, and etc. etc. It is all anti-Ukraine, and therefore he's pulled his electorate along with him. But had he been strong on Ukraine, they would have been. It's not ideological; it is tribal.
So I have two thoughts, and then I have to go. I wasn't planning on meeting, but I saw your message, and I went, okay, yeah. You came through real quick when we wanted to talk about the British elections. I was trying to do the same. Okay, so first, I think we have an awful choice between Biden, who slow walks support for Ukraine, who's all there, but I'm not going to give you enough to be able to actually prevail. I'm going to give you enough not to lose right now. And it's just slow walked and slow walked and slow walked and slow walked. And it's so freaking painful to watch. Or Trump, who seems like, as far as I can tell, he's going to be worse. Like his statements seem like he's going to be worse. The one outside possibility,
I think I know what you're going to say, because I believe this as well. But
is that he doesn't have a real center. He's not like me or you. Both of us, we know why we say what we're saying. He doesn't really have, like, he could turn on a dime and go the other direction. Now, I don't know that he will. Wouldn't bet on that, but he could do that. He could, because that's like, he's not really ideologically driven like you and I are. And so that's a possibility, but I wouldn't bet on it.
So the possibility there is because I think he's ideologically vacuous on almost everything. I don't think he has any opinions. He had 5 opinions on abortion before running in 2016, like 5 different, like depending on who he's talking to. So he doesn't. If his base wanted choice, were pro-choice, he would change to that. He's got no opinion on abortion. He
Perhaps,
doesn't
yeah.
have. I don't think he's got a moral compass that works in that way or one at all. But anyway, like the way that Trump comes to be the good option for Ukraine is but I just don't think this will happen. But if the people around him said,
Yeah, that's right.
It's all to do with the people around him, and that's the problem, is that they are ideologically against Ukraine,
and that leads to
isn't.
And that leads to my second point before I have to go, and that's this. Look for his vice presidential pick. If he picks JD Vance, it's going to be all MAGA all the time. And if he picks Nikki or Marco or
he
Tim
won't pick
Scott,
Nikki Haley.
It won't be. But I'm saying if it picks somebody in that kind of ilk, that could actually shift him into a more pro-Ukraine kind of position.
So yeah, before you go, like what I was going to say is the chance for him to turn is if you sell it to him as he becomes a hero. So if you went in and because it's all about his narcissism, then it's like if you go in and you give them everything they need and you become the hero that defeats Putin and you're the one that stands up for Ukraine and
you're the new Ronald Reagan. Yeah.
Then that I could see that happening, and he would milk that. And fair enough, if you want to do that, as long as we get the right result, then fair enough. But I just don't think he's got the people around him that would support that. Like Project 2025 people are absolutely they are ideologically against that.
There's a big
Eldridge Colby.
Yeah, you're talking about Heritage, right? Heritage used to be the premier conservative think tank that like they said everything that was where I am. And now I'm like, who are you people? Like where did you go? What happened?
So it's interesting. They have gone in this really weird direction, well, very pro-Russian direction, and I think they are compromised by Russia. I've written a massive article on that. But American Enterprise Institute, for example, like these are 2 groups I don't like. But the AEI, American Enterprise Institute, has actually gone down the proper Reagan. We properly support.
Solid.
They're solid on Ukraine, and that's where you would have thought Heritage. But Heritage, anyway.
Yeah, there's a big difference. Hey, man, I got to go. I'm sorry, but thank you for spending the time. We need to have a conversation about Trump and like what caused this and why, but we need to let facts come out. And then I think the adults on both sides need to be like, look, don't be stupid saying stupid stuff to the other side.
Yeah.
Don't be stupid saying stuff to the other side. Like that's where we need to be as a country. So
yeah, absolutely, man. Well said. And thank you so much for coming on, my man.
Yep. Thank you.
Take care, brother. Right. So yeah, that was that. And I have, quite a lot more to say on that, but it would feel a bit weird me saying all that whilst kind of agreeing that we should be more humane and not talk about those arguments concerning the assassination attempt. I'll probably do that tomorrow to remain true to what I said to Darren there. But I certainly think some of the rhetoric that's coming out does need rebutting, and there have been some pretty egregious, not just conspiracy theories, but pretty egregious. There's rhetoric coming out from a lot of people and disinformation as well. When you're talking about people like Jackson Hinkle, you throw them in, and Ma Zian-Chung, and all of these like social media ne'er-do-wells coming out and saying stuff that is really counterproductive for a decent pathway through this political quagmire. It's not even a quagmire; it's like a political forest fire. There are certain people not helping, and I was going to give quite a lot of pushback to that today, but I guess I won't for the reasons given. I will, however, go back to talking a little bit about some of the other things going on in the geopolitical realm, just so I can clear my slate, if you like. Just, I hope that's okay with you guys. Bloomberg have reported that Viktor Orban has spoken against Ukraine's NATO membership during a meeting with Zelensky in Washington. So this is when NATO was going on. Orban was obviously against that. This isn't surprising, but really frustrating. He refused to back military support for Ukraine during the summit, and suggested that Kyiv should not join the alliance, according to the Bloomberg sources. Comments sparked backlash from other leaders. You know, Viktor Orban is not a popular guy, well, unless you're a big Trump fan. He seems to be popular with that domain. It seems like suddenly countries are waking up to the fact that Russia's diplomats may be FSB agents, says Tim White. Because why? Switzerland's has been the latest nation to charge a Russian. 2 others are suspected of violating several laws. Diplomats is accused of trying to procure weapons for Russia. We are pretty sure now that the word diplomat is just another word for spy, as embassies across Europe have been known to be full of spies for some time. The rationale has been not to do anything about that, because if you know who they are and you know where they are, then you can keep an eye on them. Whereas if you dismiss them and extradite them back to Russia, then they go back into the murky grey world of not knowing where these people are. And then that can lead to those people popping up somewhere else, and you just don't have tabs on them. We've also been aware for some time, I reported on this 2 years ago now, at the beginning of the war, that some of the embassies around Europe just had loads of satellite dishes on top of them. These embassies are effectively spying headquarters it's like the fox in the chicken coop. Right in the capital cities of every nation, Russia is able to spy by having an embassy full of spies, with a roof, or with roofs covered with spying espionage equipment. Is absolutely insane. I was going to give you this brilliant speech by the Ukrainian representative to the UN, but I can't. The way I'm doing it at the moment, I can't play the sound this way, so I'll leave that one to tomorrow, as I will leave some of my kind of Trump assassination stuff till tomorrow. Irish Prime Minister Simon Harris has accepted the official invitation to President Zelensky and plans to visit Ukraine in the coming weeks. This is alongside now 3 new security agreements coming having taken place this week. President expects to sign 3 more soon. So Czechia, Slovenia, and Ireland are on the cards. Czechia is super important. They're very close and are helping a lot with Ukraine's war efforts. Slovenia, a smaller nation, less so, but super important still. Ireland's an interesting one, being a neutral nation and having an underwhelming military, having an underwhelming armed forces. I don't know what kind of agreement you would sign with Ireland, but great to have them on side, of course. Brazil, I've been really disappointed in Lula over there, because I think he's probably done some good things to reverse some of the really damaging Bolsonaro stuff in terms of the environment. It is really suffering. There's a massive, wetlands fire in Brazil the other day that just breaks your heart. But Brazil's exports and imports, so exports in blue, imports in red, to and from Russia from January to June every year from 2007 to 2024. As you can see, they are absolutely, well, they are hammering the imports there from Russia. Brazil has never imported as much from Russia as now. This isn't about Lula versus Bolsonaro. Imports red are unprecedentedly high under both. Brazil can surely buy fertilizer and diesel from some other country, one that isn't invading Ukraine and killing innocent people. I wonder whether there is a case of Brazil maybe having, and this is just pure speculation, I don't know if this is true, but I'd imagine that before the war started, they would have had a wide repertoire of nations that they could go to for, or at least wider than just one, for fertilizer and for fuel and hydrocarbons and whatnot. And now that Russia is at war and is desperate to sell their stuff, Brazil are probably in a position where they're like, yeah, we're going to buy just from you now, and you're going to give us a crazy low price because you really need to sell your stuff. So this might be there might be a slightly more savvy slightly more savvy political activity going on here than meets the eye. This isn't just Lula getting into bed with Putin, trying to do Putin a favor. This is a bit like what China and India are doing. In fact, BRICS appears to be a number of countries that are in this union with Russia. And as soon as Russia are desperate, those guys saying, yeah, we'll be your mates by buying all the stuff you want us to buy, but at a dirt cheap price. So actually, arguably Russia are not making the money they need to, but they're so desperate to sell this that those BRICS nations are just buying more than they've ever bought before. I think Brazil is just doing what India and China are doing here. Now, could you expect Brazil to do otherwise? I don't know, because if you're in a economic and political alignment with Russia, India, and China, then I mean, I'd like him to pull out of BRICS, but the likelihood of that is slim. I'm not sure that Lula is just a massive fan of China and Russia, but he's also not a massive fan of the US. And so therefore, I guess he's probably just trying to do the best in terms of buying and selling stuff as he can. But yeah, I was hoping for more from him politically in terms of political alignment. Jane Kiev says collateral damage from the US's failure to defend Ukraine continues to expand as longtime US ally Bahrain aims to join Putin's terror coalition. The value of being a US ally, 80 years of soft power, has been completely destroyed. So this idea that some of these nations in the global south, in the Middle East, in Asia, they are possibly starting to align themselves more with Russia and China. It could well be all to do with hydrocarbons, but this is not good. We are playing this game of 4D chess where people are taking sides. And while some nations are going in the US direction, you could argue Armenia, you could argue the people of Georgia, you could argue about some of those nations around there. There are other nations that appear to be moving towards the BRICS sphere of influence. And of course, it's not always going to be just about Russia, but you've got China and India and indeed Brazil to act as an attractive force there. Joint Russian-Chinese naval exercises have begun in China today. Number of ships, forces, and means involved has not been announced, but that is a worry. And then we get on to all of the Trump stuff there. So that's pretty much where I guess I'm going to leave it for today. I was, as mentioned, going to talk more about the Trump strategizing, but I feel that it would be in poor form for me to do that, having had that conversation with Darren there. Just a massive thanks to Brian. Thank you so much, mate. Be interesting. I know you put your thoughts in the live, but I have been unable to read them. But interesting to see what your thoughts are as a Republican who's not a huge fan of Trump, seeing what your thoughts on this. Do you fully blame the Democrats, or is that fair if this guy is just a lone wolf, kind of bit of a crazy kid? I'm not saying that that's the case, but if that is the case, how would that affect people's evaluations of what has happened there? But thank you very much. It's really incredibly kind of you, Brian. Richard Bennett, again, thanks so much, mate, for your ATP Geopolitics memberships that you have gifted, and as well Wayne Metcalf, super kind of you, mate. Really good to have you on board, mate. And we have Johnny Christensen with some Danish love again. Thanks, Johnny. Always good to have you hanging out, mate. And Paul Gilbert, I need to send you that stuff, Paul. Thank you, mate. I have not been on Discord for so long. I'm so insanely busy. Thanks, JP and DG, for this live stream and great discussion. I didn't ask to live in interesting times, but here we are. Slava Ukraini. This is true. I didn't ask for this, but you have to say it's like a car crash, compulsive. You rub a neck as you drive past. You just can't help yourself. It's just, my goodness, what a time we're living in. But actually, I'd much rather a boring. It's interesting that some people talk about Keir Starmer being like boring and not charismatic. Do you know what? There's a lot of us saying that's brilliant. I was down the pub the other night with a mate, and he was just like, yeah, thank goodness he's boring. Like, I just need boring. We just need some competence, get on with doing some governing, make some big decisions that are sensible and adult. We need some adults in the room. When the world is burning around you, and there are people that are so bombastic that you think, well, where's your actual substance and policy? And yes, I'm talking about Trump there, because I think that he is actually ignorant on most things political. I think he's driven by the people around him, but he just says to his audience what he wants them to hear. And there's an element of that creeping into British politics at the moment. It's just great to have someone boring at the helm that and actually seems like a fairly nice, decent guy, Keir Starmer, actually, and it's just nice. Anyway, sorry, I am giving you my political bias there. Lynn says, gives 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thanks, Lynn. You are a legend. I hope you are well with health and whatnot. Peter Vinker, thanks again for all your good work, Jonathan. Thank you, mate, with your super sticker from Europe somewhere. Peter Vinker sounds Belgian. I'm probably wrong there. And Goose Springsteen. Random question, Jonathan. But would you ever consider trying to do an interview with Mark Galeotti? Yes, I would. Absolutely. I think you would have a very interesting discussion. He just wrote a book about Prigozhin. Yes, he has. And actually, although I'm not massively interested in Prigozhin, like per se, enough to like go and read his book on that, possibly because I don't have the time. I've got a backlog of books as long as my arm. Actually, when I heard an interview with him on, I can't remember whether it's Times Radio, Silicon Curtain, something, everything he says about Prigozhin is so relevant to how you understand Russia that actually it is a really good vehicle to give you a greater understanding of the machinations of the Kremlin and the Russian way of life. So, yeah, interesting. I definitely would. Of course, I would interview virtually anyone. I just never have time, or sometimes have the time, but I don't have the contacts or the time to look for the contacts to be able to get hold of people. If anyone is, friends with anyone that is willing to be interviewed in terms of like knows them through socials, like Mark Galeotti, for example, and can organize interviews for me, I'm game. I'm game for all of that. It's just I am very short on time. Yeah, every time I have heard Mark Galeotti, I've been in huge agreement with the sort of things he's been saying. I remember when I went out to Ukraine, I listened to an interview on the it was the latest interview with Mark Galeotti that I was listening to on the airplane, and thought it was a really edifying experience that was. But yes, we have, just to let you guys know, because I know some of you are ignorant of things that are supremely important, and you just unfortunately live in contexts that breed gross ignorance. And I'm sorry that you experienced that. But anyway, England are playing Spain tonight in the Euro 2024's football, not soccer, football, Euro 2024 finals. And of course, you really want to know about that. And I'm just letting you know now. I'm putting that ignorance to bed. You now know that's happening. I expect you to be rooting for England against Spain. Although I did see a great meme the other day on Tinternet, which was like Europe, right? All the people, who everyone in Europe is supporting, whatever. Like every nation had a Spanish flag: Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Ireland, every nation of Europe, and then there was England with the English flag. I was like, yep, that's pretty much it. We are on our own. We ain't getting any support for England. It's just like, it's like when you watch Star Wars. Oh, look, all the bad guys are English. Who knew? Oh, I suppose you got Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi as well. But bad guys in films, British. Everyone loves to hate the British, so maybe we've earned that. I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't have walked around the world sticking flags in other people's countries and nicking their people and natural resources. Maybe that's what did it. But anyway, that said, of course, you all want England to win. Anyway, right, I don't want to get into this argument, guys, but it is football. And Roy Collins, sorry, I only watch American football. How often do they use their feet? How often do they use their feet, Roy? Come on, answer me that. Riddle me that one, Roy. How often do American footballers use their feet to kick the ball? They might punt it once in a blue moon. Yeah. Anyway, I'll shut up now. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate all your support. And Brian, Ivy, and all you others who have supported, thank you so much. I will return to this subject tomorrow. There is a lot of content that I was going to be sharing with you that I'm going to stall. I do hope that we get back to just sensible political discourse. I just don't think we will. I think this is going to be too much. There's too much grist to the mill here for people, particularly, sadly enough, and this is going to sound partisan, but actually Republicans by point of fact that it was Trump that was targeted there. Had it been the other way around, it would have been the other way around. But it's naturally going to be the people of the party of Trump are going to be the most angry about this, and they will be wanting revenge and retribution. And I do worry that political discourse will be hugely affected, massively negatively affected. And the only way of calming that down is for Trump to do that. Now, I think his speech today, what he asked for today, did go some way to doing that. Like, it is, hats off to him for being like that. I just want to show you what he has said, and it is on here we are. I'll just show it to you here, and I'll leave you kind of with this, because I think, yeah, he said the right thing. So Trump says, "Thank you to everyone for your thoughts and prayers yesterday, as it was God alone who prevented the unthinkable from happening." Now, interestingly, his audience, of course, is going to be Republicans. Trump no more believes in God than, well, basically, he doesn't believe in God, but he knows what side his bread is buttered. Anyway, to continue, we will fear not, but instead remain resilient in our faith and defiant in the face of wickedness. Of course, he didn't write this, but it's a sensible thing for him to say. Our love goes out to the other victims and their families. Yep. We pray for the recovery of those who are wounded and hold in our hearts the memory of the citizen who was so horribly killed. In this moment, it is more important than ever that we stand united and show our true character as Americans, remaining strong and determined and not allowing evil to win. I truly love our country, and I love you all, and look forward to speaking to our great nation this week from Wisconsin, DJT. And I have to say that is, as you would expect from any president, that those aren't his words. They were written by a speechwriter, but nonetheless, that is still sensible rhetoric from him, and a lot calmer than it could have been. And so that certainly is the right approach, and I think more of that will be needed, because I am scared that the political domain will become pretty fractious going forward. What I am going to leave you with is a nice picture of me and my missus, just having our Peaky Blinders session last night. Let's just leave this a bit positive. It's a Peaky effing Blinders. For those who haven't watched Peaky Blinders, you need to. That was me last night. So good times were had last night, and then I got back. I was designated driver. Got back, and then, oh my goodness, Trump's had an assassination attempt, and so got straight back into talking geopolitics after 5 hours of having some nice Peaky Blinders times. Anyway, that's enough from me, guys. Take care. You'll really appreciate all of your support, and I appreciate you guys, and I will speak to you tomorrow. Toodle pips, and good luck, England. Of course, you will all be joining me in supporting the England football team. Toodle pips.